I've been assured by people that the third season does get better again, and I hope they're right, because otherwise I'm going to have to reevaluate some friendships. Orphan Black Season 2. There's no timeliness to this at all, but I did a review of the first season of Orphan Black after I finished it. I feel like doing one of the second season, and oh boy. I'm not giving up on the show because the first season was better, so I know the show can be better than what I got in this season, and there are good things about it still. It's not a complete everything went down the drain, but there's a lot of problems in this season. But let's start out positive. What did I like? Well, surprisingly, some of the stuff that I didn't like last season. For instance, Allison. I love her in this. I don't know if it's just more time with her and she's grown on me, but I love her neuroses, and yet she's able to sort of take a breath and just tackle the immediate situation. I love Donnie at this point. I think he's turning into a really interesting character. While I wasn't thrilled that Dr. Leakey exited the show, because as I mentioned last season, I really love Matt Frewer, the way that he exited was brilliant. I now really like Helena, who I also didn't like last season. She's used so much better this time. She's now kind of functioning almost a little bit as an all-purpose wild card, and I think that suits her so much better than just being a tool of the villains. We also get Cal, who I like. That I'll mostly just chalk up to charisma. The guy's just a really likable actor. He works very well. Rachel is a terrific villain. What I especially love about her is that, she's all business, or at least that's her appearance. She's like, it's just business, it's not personal, but we see through scenes and just the performance, oh, it's deeply personal. It's really, really personal for her. And I like that contrast as someone who's gonna say, this is not personal, but it is. That just makes a more interesting, deeper villain. And some of the stuff that was good last season remains good. Mrs. S is still good. Felix is still good. Vic, I was shocked that I was happy when Vic showed up again, because this is a character that I should be annoyed when he shows up again. He should just be an irritation. Oh, we're still dealing with this guy. But again, I'm going to chalk it up to the actor. He's just fun and energetic and charismatic, and he brings a great feeling and flavor to whatever episodes he's in. So I was happy to see him back, and I think they used him in just the right amount. All of that having been said, there's a lot of problems with this season overall. I guess we'll start with the Proletheans. Now, I've got a lot of issues with this. First of all, they're generic as heck, because we never get to understand what their belief system is. I mean, there's these very vague references to the work of God and Helena's a miracle, but why do they think that? Why are they interested in her? Heck, scratch that. Why is anybody interested in the clones at all? This seems to be way deeper than just this idea of, oh, this is revolutionary technology or revolutionary science. We should continue this. Everybody, they act like they've got some deeper agenda, but we don't know what any of them are. And that was intriguing in the first season. At this point, at least one of them, it would have been nice to get an answer for how many friggin' factions there are, because there's Dyad and there's a splinter within that. You can practically carve that into two halves in the first place. There's the Proletheans. There's whoever the heck Mrs. S is aligned with. At the very end, we get this notion that there's a military angle. I mean, all these people want the clones, and we still don't really know why. But getting back to the Proletheans specifically, their religion aspect is so generic, obviously probably in an effort to not offend anyone, to not get specific. But I mean, you're obviously making it up. You gave it a made-up name, so give me some details for what it is, what makes them unique, because you just outwardly, you made them very kind of Christian cultish, but I don't know if that was supposed to be just a general insert Christian cult here thing. But I mean, they're just not interesting. It was like the Neolutions last season. That was the least interesting part of that season, but the Proletheans are just as uninteresting, but eat up way more time. Art is painfully underused in this season, because he was one of the highlights last season. We barely see him this season. Instead, we spend this time with his partner, who is grating in terms of both what she is doing, which does not add anything to the story, and just her personality. I'm like, you're annoying. Go away. I don't like you. Cosima at this point annoys me. She was a little bit, she basically rode neutral for me in the first season. I didn't jump on board with her, and at this point I now actively dislike her because I feel like the makers of this show knew who their audience was going to be, and that the audience for this kind of show, with this kind of sci-fi bent, was going to be kind of geeky. So they just gave her a couple of geeky aspects. Oh, she's sciencey and she's into whatever this made-up version of D&D is. Don't you love her? Well, no, because you haven't really characterized her beyond these very broad strokes. She's there for exposition and to just try and be a geek crush, but there's very little depth to her. Oh, and let's not forget her plot convenientitis, this wonderful disease that gets worse whenever it's going to move the plot along and then gets better when we want to focus on other things. It's contrived, lazy writing. And especially when I look at someone like Allison and how much the show has worked to characterize her and give her all these layers and give her all these depths, and it put in all this work so that I did grow to like her, and I feel like none of that kind of work was done with Cosima. They just gave her a few characteristics that they figured would be very favorable to the audience that this is intended for, and left it at that. And you know what? I don't care. I was actually annoyed when she turned out not to die in the last episode of this season. I would rather she have died because I don't feel like she's contributing anything other than exposition and the occasional plot motivator. But there's another thing that links into this, and this links into something else, and that has to do with her being a lesbian. Now, I brought that up briefly last season, but I didn't bring up the thing about it that actually bothered me kind of actively because I was prepared to just let it go and not make a thing out of it. But thanks to the introduction of Tony, who first of all is pointless. He shows up, he does nothing, he vanishes. What was the point of him? But even beyond that, the implications of that character I actually have a big problem with. Now, before I go on this little mini rant, I will preface this in saying the subtext I'm about to talk about I do not believe to be intentional, I do not believe to be deliberate, and I do not believe to be hateful in any way. However, I do believe that subtext is still there whether they meant to do it or not, and it's problematic for me. What that subtext is all these clones, they are genetically identical. So that means whatever differences there are between them is down to how they were raised, their upbringing, their experiences, their nurturing. So what that means is if Cosima is gay, then the only thing making her gay is whatever her experience is. And since we've had absolutely no indication of even bi tendencies in any of the other clones, that means that the show is saying, again, probably unintentionally, but it's saying that being gay is a choice, and it does not run deeper than that, because if it did, it shouldn't have just been one of them. Now, as I said, I was prepared to let that go last season because I'm like, they probably thought it was just a cute idea to have one of them be gay. This is not intentional, we'll let it go. But now they've done it with a trans character in addition to a lesbian character, because again, Tony is genetically identical to all the rest of them, and yet goes down this path. And I'm not trying to get into that debate of whether being trans or being gay is something you're born with or something that is raised by nurture. I mean, let's be honest, most of the science points to that there is something inherent in you, and it's not just how you were raised, meaning it's not a choice. But regardless of where you fall in that debate, the fact remains that the idea that being trans or being lesbian is a choice is a notion that has been the backbone for people making arguments that are rooted in the intention to oppress these people. Saying you're just choosing to do that is a big part of what gets people who want to undermine them and deny them rights. That's a big part of their argument a lot of the time, and that makes this a problem, because the only way it makes sense that one of the clones ends up trans and another one ends up gay and the rest don't is that, well, it's a choice. Because if it was down to genetics, it shouldn't just be these two. This is really problematic for me as a viewer. And again, I don't think they did it on purpose, but once is a fluke, twice is a pattern. At best, they're just not paying enough attention to what the things that they're putting in the show imply. And I might have been able to let it go if Tony had been a meaningful character. But as I said, he serves no function whatsoever, at least as we saw him in this season. I mean, maybe he'll come back and be important next season, but if that ends up being the case, just introduce him next season. Don't have him show up here and do nothing. The last thing I gotta go off on is basically the last episode. Last episode drove me crazy because there was a lot of very stupid stupid stuff. Well, actually, even in the lead up to the last episode, there's some very stupid things that happen. And when I say stupid, I don't necessarily mean plot developments. I mean characters do incredibly stupid things. I'm going to start with Sarah, who is not my favorite clone anymore, partly because Allison now occupies that spot, but also because of what I'm about to talk about, which is that Sarah is actually pushing for Kira to donate the bone marrow to save Cosima. Now, I understand Sarah wants to save Cosima, but it's her daughter. She's known this clone woman for, I don't know what the timeline is at this point, but it can't have been more than a few months. And she's pushing to put her daughter at risk to save her. No, it doesn't work. What should have happened was Sarah should have been saying what Mrs. S was saying, which is that any risk to Kira is too much. But then other characters go, well, why don't you ask her what she wants? And then Kira saying, Mommy, I want to do this. I want to help save her. And then that would have Sarah be, well, I can't say no to you if this is what you want to do because you'll hate me if I don't let you do this. That would have worked and would have been fine, would have been consistent with the characters. But the fact that Mrs. S was the one who had to be making that argument and Sarah was basically pushing to endanger her daughter. No, that's not okay. That's really dumb. And it's made worse by the fact that they stay in the same hospital that the operation happens in for her to recover. Dyad knows where you are. They had someone there picking up the stuff. Leave! Don't stay there. And that's the kind of really stupid stuff that happens in the final stretch of this episode. There's the character of Duncan, who I actually really liked. I like this guy a lot. But the way that he was closed out and the way that he died was just really stupid. And I don't mean the fact that he committed suicide. I buy that. That's fine. It works with the character as I understood him. No problem with that. But here's the thing. At this point, he is a prisoner. It's not one of those sort of, villain kind of cliches where it's like, oh, you're my guest, but I'm just not going to let you leave. No, he's obviously a prisoner. They took away his normal clothes, put him in prisoner clothes, and yet they let him keep his specialty. Who is the head of security at Dyad? Because they need to be fired right now. And on that same note, are you telling me that Cosima, who is a clone, she is part of this project, and Dyad knows she has been in contact with other clones, some of whom they are actively trying to pursue, there's no security cameras in the lab that she's in to monitor what she's doing, and she and that other guy can just make a friggin' pencil gun and nobody is paying any attention to what's going on in that lab? And finally, the final straw of stupidity. After Sarah escapes and Cosima sneaks out of Dyad and they know that Rachel and all these other people are going to be pissed and looking for them, where do they hole up? Felix's apartment. Dyad knows about Felix and they know where he lives. Everybody who's after them knows who Felix is and they know where he lives. And it's not even like they stopped off there to get supplies to go off somewhere safer. They spend the night there. I'm stunned that Helena's the only one who got grabbed. And then there's the final twist at the end, which just has no meaning for me, again, because I don't know enough about why the clones exist in the first place or why everyone wants them. So this idea that you're going, there's another batch of clones, I'm like, I still don't know what the first batch was for, so that doesn't mean anything to me. Just a lot of dumb stuff, a lot of stuff dragging the season down, stuff that wasn't interesting, stuff that was unnecessary, stuff that was just stupid. There's still things that are working. All the stuff that I talked about at the front end, the first season was good, so I'm gonna come back and watch the third season and hopefully catch up on that before the fourth season starts airing. But man, I tell you, if this second season had been the first, I wouldn't have kept watching. So yeah, that's this was not particularly fun. So second season of Orphan Black, I am now through it. I'll get started on the third season as soon as I'm able to. Have you seen all of the second season of Orphan Black? What were your thoughts on it? Whatever they were, drop something down in the comments and let's talk about it. Until next time, this council is adjourned.